I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. Thanks, Moose. Much appreciated. Had to come in off the hot early to throw in that thanks. And also, Fish Facts and War. Thanks for the follow prior to me even coming on stream. That's a lot of faith. Hello, everybody. And welcome to another adventure in history. I'm unfamiliar with what the YouTube clip here is, but let's see what we got. I love you, Spartacus. Aw, I love you, Spartacus.
I love you, Spartacus.
Good stuff. Hello, everybody. And happy Thursday afternoon, or Thursday evening, or Friday morning, or wherever it is and whatever time it is for you. Welcome to Adventures in History. I'm your host, Shane McInnes. It's a show where we talk about old stuff, but we make fun of it and ourselves and pop culture, and we have a good time, because history doesn't have to be boring and lame, and it doesn't have to be unengaging. It can be interesting. And that's what we're here for. So, hope everybody's having a good one. It has been a long week for me. It is the last week of a couple of my classes and the next to last week of the rest of my classes. And when the semester gets towards the end, it always gets crazy. And everybody always comes out of the woodwork and starts asking questions. And all this fun stuff about why is my grade low? And I thought I turned that in, and all of these things. So I started the day today with 53 emails, and I managed to get through most of them, but not all, alas. It's an all-day kind of thing. But enough about my day. How's your day? How are you all doing? How's everybody doing? How are you all faring in the land of COVID, which continues to stretch out before us? Email, more like Z-mail. Yeah, really, I know. Back in the old days when we used to send these things to our friends called emails. Now everybody, I swear that if I made some sort of Snapchat for my job and gave it to all of my students, I would probably end up with more communication from some of my students. You pulled a muscle in your mid-back by sitting in your chair. Oh, Moose. That sucks. I once pulled a muscle in my back leaning over to pick up a sock that I had dropped out of the washing machine. So, yeah, it happens. There's so many of those great memes that are basically like someone falling off of a house and it says me when I was 5, and then like them getting up and walking away, and then it's like somebody in a full body cast and it's like me sleeping wrong at 37 or something like that. So it's tough getting older. We just become history, right? Old history teachers never die, they just become part of the topic. Can relate. Oh, man. Well, I hope you get better, and I hope that it is not a completely debilitating thing. But those muscles in your back are ones that you never really understand how much you use until you're not supposed to use them, and then you realize exactly how many times you move your back muscles. Judge, Cave Geek, you are correct. I am the judge. This is a Semitic word, and it's the word for judge in Hebrew, but it's also the word for judge or leader in the Carthaginian language, which is based in Phoenician, which of course is very similar in many respects to the Semitic languages, like I am the law, exactly. How's it going, Cave Geek? How are you, man? Hope everything's well in your world. I don't know if I have seen you since you were on Moose and Joby's show, but that was a great show. For those of you that don't know, Cave Geek Art here is a great streamer. You should totally go check out his channel. The work that he does is really, really interesting. It's very unique. I don't know anybody else that does anything like it. He has a wood burning tool that he has either modified or had someone modify. I can't remember exactly which one it is. But he uses that to burn images on leather. And he then makes maps and paints stuff. It's great. You should go check it out. But he was on another streamer, Joby Door, who, if you don't know, you should go follow, and Paradox Moose, friend of the channel here. They have a podcast on Joby's channel on Sundays, and Cave Geek was on that show this Sunday. It was good stuff. And then makes paints using deer eyeballs. Yes, there was a large discussion about deer eyeballs. Can we have the whole stream like that? Well, Cave, I don't know if you know or not, but for a brief period of my life, I was actually a theater major. And oh yeah, there we go. Art condition. Boom, check it out. I really enjoy doing theater stuff. And one of the things you can do with Adventure Points is to ask me to do impersonations, which I quite like, and I have no problem. I don't always know how to do them. People pick stuff that I should probably know how to do, and I've never thought about it before. There are a few gaps in my my pop cultural knowledge that I feel like I should probably just break down and watch all of the episodes of The Simpsons, but I'm not really that big of a Simpsons fan. I know that's probably blasphemy, but they just never really did it for me. So I know I'm losing street cred, but I guess that's okay. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah, Carthage. I thought Carthage stuff was pre-Alexander BTW. Don't have to go into it, but are we just going in vague order? So here's the thing. Carthage was around for a really long time, and it's hard to try to figure out when to put stuff, because if I'm going in pure chronological order, I would have to break stuff down in like decade-sized chunks and say, here's what's going on everywhere in this decade. So what I have done is organized the stream into what I call phases, and I totally stole this from Marvel's Cinematic Universe. So right now we are in what is effectively phase 4, and it covers stuff that happens between the 500s and the 200s BC. So if it happened between 500 and 200, it's going in this phase. Oh yeah, Carthage continued during the Punic War stuff, and then, well, it got taken over by the Romans in the hundreds, but we're not to the 100s yet. We're going to cut off today at 201, which is about as close to 200 as we can get without breaking the next century threshold. So yeah, we are in phase 4, and maybe I should figure out some way to designate that. Maybe I will make a page or a channel or something in the Discord that symbolizes where we are. Because, again, without trying to do like, here's what happened this decade, it's really hard to get everything in absolute chronological order. But yes, we'll talk about stuff that is actually outside of Phase 4 very briefly. But most of the stuff that we're talking about tonight with Carthage takes place between about the 500s to the 200s BC. So, fair question. Speaking of, let's talk about Carthage. So first off, where is this thing? Well, Carthage started off as a colony of the Phoenicians. And these are groups of people that were pretty big deals back in the collapse area between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. So roughly 1000 to about 900 BC is when the Phoenicians really start kicking things off. But they set up this big trade network that is effectively going to take the place of the deceased Bronze Age trade network. And it looks like this. And the Phoenicians are all over the place. The big cities of the Phoenicians are over here. Can I zoom out a little bit more? I don't know why it's not picking up all of the images over here. This is Byblos, Sidon, and Tyre, three of the big Phoenician cities. And you can see that they are exploring all sorts of stuff over here, and they're founding cities like Cyrene, Leptis, and our topic for tonight, Carthage. So Carthage starts off as a city right around 1200 BC or so, and it's going to be linked into this larger Phoenician trade network. And for a long time, it's just going to kind of be that guy that's over there in the west. And the western part of the Mediterranean is not as abundantly populated as the eastern part. This is partially because of lag from human migration. It's also because, well, they didn't even try to go up to the Italy area. They did for a little bit, but the people that were there were not particularly hospitable. And just to be honest, there's not a lot of stuff in Italy at that point. There's not necessarily an overwhelmingly large amount of farmland there. There isn't a lot of natural metal resources there. So, I mean, you could make a city and you could make a colony, but just to be honest, the cooler stuff was down on the southern side of the Mediterranean, where it was much more fertile. You had access to all sorts of trade networks through Africa, places like Egypt and down into even the Atlantic side of Africa. They didn't get along from the start. No, not really. There's also the Etruscans there, starting in around the 900s. And the Etruscans had a pretty decent-sized trade network that went through what would have been northern Italy and the region of southern France called Provence, which is basically, I can show you here on the map, the sort of coastal region right around in here. As Edward Longshanks famously said, the trouble with Italy is that it's full of Italians. And the crazy thing about that is Edward Longshanks is actually kin to a lot of those Italians because he was descended from the Normans, and so were a lot of those Italian people, especially the southern Italians who were basically just Normans. So, you know, they can take our land, but they can never take our freedom. I feel like I have to say that every time we talk about Longshanks. Yeah, the Italians also, at that period of time, were not unified and were very pleased with causing trouble in other parts of the world. The Venetians had started causing a lot of trouble. The Genoese had started growing up and kind of hammering out trade networks. A lot of these people also traded, a lot of the Italian people traded with Ottomans and Muslim people, which was kind of a big no-no in the European world at that time. But I'm way off topic. Right, the Normans were named such by a dyslexic Roman. It's actually, you know what it's from. It's from Norseman, meaning man of the north, because the Norse were Vikings and had settled there since Rollo in the 800s. You know all that stuff, though. That's 800s AD, by the way. I love rambling about history. I can just do this junk off the top of my head ad nauseum. Speaking of off the top of my head, I got home, and about an hour or so before I started streaming, I realized that I had typed my outline, which I normally sort of prep a couple of days ahead of time. I had left it on the computer that I keep at work, and I did not have a copy of it. So I had to regurgitate all of the knowledge that I had about Carthage onto a new Word document, which I have titled Quick and Dirty Carthage. So I feel like I might miss some dates because that's the one thing that I can't always keep straight in my head. I always know the story, but I can't always keep the dates right. So yeah, Quick and Dirty Carthage. Anyway, so Google Docs for the win. I hate the cloud. I do not like the cloud. I will not use the cloud with a fox. I will not use the cloud in a box. I do not like the cloud at all. I don't like it at all. It's not my thing. I just don't like it. That goes a long time back into my IT days, and we won't have to go into that stuff. That's back in the old period, Shane. More like that. I guess that would be like Iron Age, Shane. Anyway, so these Phoenicians, they have these colonies all over the Mediterranean. And around the 700s, they start getting competition from the Greeks. And we've talked about the Greeks before in the stream, so we don't have to talk about them too terribly much. And they're overall not... they're tangentially important to the story at the beginning. That newfangled cloud thingy. Yeah, old man yells at cloud. That's me. Anyway, the Greeks over here are going to start expanding colony-wise all through this... Western Mediterranean territory. The region of southern Italy right here, the heel and toe of the boot are going to be colonized, and they're going to call this region Magna Graecia, or Greater Greece. And they're going to put their eyeballs on this island right here of Sicily. And man, is this island going to be the topic of so many discussions tonight. Sicily had been in the hands of the Phoenicians going all the way back to the 1200s or so. And when the Greeks move in, they just kind of take over the part of the island over here. This would be the eastern part of the island, and they start building cities like Agrigento, and the big one is this guy right here called Syracuse. And this is going on in the 700s. By the 600s or so, the Greeks control most of the eastern part of Syracuse. And they were becoming a pretty serious threat to the Phoenician trade route. And Carthage is going to sort of step up during this point. Again, Carthage is based right here, what is in modern-day Tunisia. They're going to effectively become the sort of the linchpin of the Phoenician Western trade network. They're going to be the biggest of the cities over here. They're going to run sort of interference against the Greeks over here. And they're going to continuously funnel money back to their parent city, which was the city of Tyre, which is spelled like this. I'm not familiar with these Greeks. Could you give me a complete lowdown? The VODs are still around, so there's a lot of lowdown already download. You can download the lowdown. Hey, check that out. I didn't even plan on that. That just happened that way. The wheel was invented in Tyre. Yeah, they were steel belted radials over there. So at this point, Carthage is going to more or less decide to occupy the western part of the island of Sicily, which is sort of the less mountainous region. And they're going to use this to sort of try to keep the Greeks out, just to be honest. They're trying to battle out the Greeks, and that fact is entirely true. Well played. Bad puns are absolutely welcome. Puns of any sort, bad, good, dad puns, whatever you want to make, you go ahead. You do use. So these Greeks are an issue, and the Phoenicians don't care for them, and the Carthaginians really don't care for them. And things are going to start getting pretty bad back at home for the Phoenicians because of people like, well, just to be honest, those Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar II starts expanding out of Babylon around the late 580s. This would be, early 580s, because we're going backwards in time. So like the 587s, 586s, 585s. And some of the cities that he's really going to be interested in taking are those big trade cities along the Mediterranean coastline over here in the Levant, because it's a lot of money to get. And this is going to end up with Tyre getting sacked and being put under foreign rule, which is interesting for Carthage, because this is going to happen in the 580s. And Carthage is going to see some wiggle room right here. They had become sort of a a de facto leader, and they're going to try to just maybe think that they can just kind of go it alone. Maybe they can break away from the mom city and become their own little kingdom. And this is accomplished by a guy named Mago the First. Mago. Mago the First rules from 550 to 530 BC. And he's going to be the guy that really starts the real good independent streak of the Carthaginians, because he's going to politically begin to make all of his own decisions. Now, there is some evidence to suggest that Mago still at least made a nod at economic connection back to the Phoenicians. There are still going to apparently be some levels of maybe friendly ties between the two, but make no mistake, Mago is a king, and Carthage at this point is politically independent. Not to be confused with Mr. Magoo. No, Mago has great vision. And his vision is making the Carthaginians not just the biggest of the Phoenician colonies in the Western Mediterranean, but he wants to make them the biggest power, the biggest independent power in the Western Mediterranean. But he's got some hurdles. First off, well, there's still those Greeks, those pesky expanding Greeks that are still trying to edge their way over here into Sicily and up the coastline of Italy and over here to these islands, Corsica and Sardinia. These islands here are going to be, we'll talk about them a lot. They're also over here in these islands, which are called the Balearics, and then even as far away over here as Iberia, which is modern-day Spain. Those darn Greeks always bring their gifts everywhere, and they get their gifts from everywhere because they're trading everywhere. And the Carthaginians don't like that. And Mago doesn't like that because every, we're not using dollars back then, clearly, but every dollar that leaves the Western Mediterranean going back to Greece makes this region just a little bit more broke. Modern-day Spain and Portugal. That is correct, Green Eyes Mio. Well done, sir. Or madam. Or person. Hey, how's it going? I call everybody. Well done, sir, is kind of a thing that I say. Miss. Well done, miss. There we are. Better a Greek gift than a German gift. Ooh. I like Greek food better than I like German food, but I like German chocolate better than I like Greek chocolate. I mean, Greek chocolate isn't even really a thing. I can speak more Greek than I can speak German. Well, actually, I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah, I probably can speak more Greek than I can German. So, gift in German is poison. What does gift mean in German? Oh, there we go. That's see, there's my German. I don't know I missed the verbal pun there. But that's a good one. I'm going to have to remember that one. Gift means poison. I like it. That's a good little turn of phrase. I'm going to have to put that one down. So, Mago, what's he up to? He decides we got to get rid of these Greeks. How are we going to do that? Well, who else hates the Greeks that we can put together in a group ourselves? Because we don't really want to reach backwards because, well, the Babylonians are over there. And by this point, by the time that Mago is really pushing for stuff, it's not just the Babylonians. The Babylonians had been replaced by the Persians, those good old Persian guys like Cyrus the Great. The puns tonight. You visited Germany for a week. You was there meeting a Microsoft team. They had been there the week prior, and when I showed up, they were like, "We're tired of German food. Do you mind if we eat at Plenty Hall?" Oh, really? Oh. German food's okay. I'm a carnivore. I have pointy teeth right here. Hey, Life of Mamba, how's it going, my friend? I like pickled foods too. I mean, I guess sauerkraut and knotwurst and all that stuff would get a little old after a week, but Who knows? But we're talking about food. Yeah, we're always talking about food. We always end up on the topic of food somehow. It's like everybody eats it, right? A subject you're actually good at. I can eat with the best of them. Okay, so the Persians are showing up. The Persians actually take over Phoenicia as well, which causes a whole bunch of Phoenicians to run. And they run all the way over here to the Western Mediterranean, trying to get into these old colonies that they used to have. So not only do the Carthaginians have Greeks coming in, trying and sneaking around and making new colonies, they have an influx of the old Phoenicians, who they don't want around either. And these people, the Greeks and the Phoenicians at that point, were looking at Corsica and Sardinia. So this is Corsica and Sardinia right here again. So they go to the Etruscans. So the Etruscans were a group of people that had a kind of federation of cities here in northern Italy, northern and central Italy. And they make a treaty with Mago. And the deal is basically, we're going to pool our resources and we're going to beat up the Greeks and the Phoenicians. If you had to rank your favorite Mediterranean food, which one do you like more? The one that's in front of me that I can afford. I like kofta. I'm a big fan of the kebab. I like shawarma. Pita bread goes with everything. I don't have. I am not a picky eater. I love Mediterranean food of all sorts. Do we want to throw Italian in there, or are we going to throw like Italian coastal food, like Italian seafood? Or are we going to throw like northern Italian stuff was actually kind of influenced by the Germans in there? Are we going to throw in the Spanish, Spanish food? Are we going to get that's such a broad topic. I like eating. I would be a lot larger than I am now if I ate every time that I thought about it. And I'm already a pretty big guy. So, okay. We make this deal with the Etruscans, and Mago and the Etruscan allies are going to push the Greeks and the Phoenicians out of the Western Mediterranean, and they divide up the spoils. Etruscans get the island of Corsica as ports and colonies for themselves, and the Carthaginians get the island of Sardinia. So, looking good. Northern Italian focuses more on pasture since it's further from the coast, correct? It's also a lot heavier, and the sauces are different. You see a lot more red meat up that way. Beef and cheese, but also deer and sheep. Don't forget the deer and the sheep. Italian red deer is delicious. It was the main course of the best meal I've ever had in my life. Man, that was such a good meal. I'm not talking about meals right now. I actually already had leftover Indian food for dinner, so I'm pretty happy. Oh yeah, Italian deer, very very tasty. Anyway, so these Etruscans and these Carthaginians are actually looking pretty strong. And the Persians at that point, Cyrus the Great had died and his son Cambyses was taking over. Cambyses had taken over Egypt and was looking out this direction. So from the borders of Egypt, which were right about here at that time, to Carthage was not really so far away. And Cambyses is like, Carthage, that city's looking kind of nice. And this is an interesting moment in history because Cambyses demands a fleet. He goes to the Phoenicians and it says, "Look, you guys know about all of this stuff. You're now a part of you are now a part of my empire. Give me all of your ships and take me over to this Carthage so that I can conquer it." And the Phoenicians refuse. Now, that's an interesting moment because the Carthaginians had just recently run them out of the Western Mediterranean. So some people think that maybe they were trying to suck up to Carthage to try to get some of that sweet, sweet trade action back. Other people think that they were just so hacked off at Cambyses for taking them over that they just really didn't feel like making the motion. Like, we really don't like you. We're not going to let you use our boats. So Carthage is spared the Persian expanse, which doesn't happen to their neighbors, the Libyans. The Libyans end up getting conquered by the next Persian leader, the guy named Darius. But Libya is going to be an issue in just a second. So, at some point in this discussion around Mago, probably somewhere towards the end of Mago's reign, around 530 or so BC, these Libyan people are going to be big enough to cause enough trouble to Carthage that Carthage has to pay them tribute. Now, this seems a bit strange to many historians because Libya was not a large enough kingdom at that point to necessarily do an overwhelmingly large amount of damage to Carthage. What is probably the case is that the Libyans were just enough of a pest that Carthage could not squash them completely, and it was cheaper for Carthage to pay them to stay away. So, is this really tribute, or is this go away and shut up money? So as an aside, you look at this map and you see sand and rock and no green stuff. Was it that dry back then too? That is a great question, Moose, and the answer is no. The northern coast of Africa, for the majority of the ancient world, was significantly more fertile. The Sahara Desert has expanded some probably 100 or 200 miles. I don't know. Let me do some math. Yeah, probably about 200 miles since that period of time. So had you looked back in time and seen this northern strip of Africa, it would have been much more fertile. And in the coming the coming centuries, once Rome takes it over, the city of Rome, in the 190s, 180s, and 170s and I guess all the way until they take over Egypt, which is under Caesar Augustus in the 20s BC. The majority of the food that feeds the city of Rome is going to come from northern Africa. It was a breadbasket. It was really, really fertile. It made a lot of food. That's a great question. And this is part of trying to use our historical imagination. Even the Nile was much more fertile. Yes, because it wasn't as contained as it is now. The valley of the Nile was much wider because it was significantly less man-constrained. Now the modern-day Nile River is under incredibly significant locks and dams that keep it basically from flooding, period. The ancient people had done some work to sort of, try to manage this stuff. And actually Ptolemy II of the Ptolemaic Empire did a lot of work to try to expand regions using different aquifers and aqueducts and ditches and drainage canals. There's this whole region called the Fayum that's basically created by the Ptolemies. You can see it actually on the map. It's this little green spot right here. That little green spot was not originally there. All the way back in Ptolemaic Egypt, they dug a really big trench and canal, and as the river flooded, it would flood this whole area and basically turn this whole region into a fertile area. Mentioned that back in the Ptolemaic stream. Also mentioned that because it's in Assassin's Creed Origins. Lots of dams in the south. Yes, both southern Egypt and what is today northern Sudan have lots of dams and locks and stuff. So, good questions, though. So, at some point, there are these problems with Libya, and Carthage has to pay them money. Some people call it tribute and say that the Libyans had actually shown up in force and forced the Carthaginians into subservience. I don't know if I completely believe that. I think that the idea that they were causing too much trouble and it was just easier to pay them to go away is more likely the case. Because that area falls pretty quickly, or part of that area falls pretty quickly to Darius not too long after Mago was dead. So, were they so powerful? I don't know. This is just me speculating. I should probably have the opinion hat on at this moment, but I don't. So, after Mago, Mago, by the way, is going to start a dynasty that's called the Magonids. Such a great, constructive nickname here, the Magonids. But his son takes over. His son's name is Hasdrubal. Opinion hat. Yeah, this is opinion hat. I should be more judicious when I'm using that. Okay, so Hasdrubal takes over in 530. He rules from 530 to 510. He apparently goes over to try to fight with the Libyans, and they had some fairly sizable battles, but it was kind of undecisive or indecisive. Neither side really gained anything, and they still have to end up paying the Libyans. But he's going to expand in the opposite direction, going back along the northern coast of Africa towards this direction. So this region right here is historically referred to as Numidia, and then the region over here is referred to as Mauritania. Modern-day country of Mauritania is over this way. So Numidia and Mauritania both fall under Carthaginian domination under Hasdrubal, which, if we pronounced it correctly in the original Phoenician, it would be Hasdrubal. I don't know if Cave Geek is still around or not, but the last element of this name, Baal, is actually Baal, like that Baal. So, Hasdrubal. I believe it means something like the glory of Baal. If you grew up in a Southern Baptist church, it's pronounced Baal, which is not accurate. But moving along. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. So, eventually, at some point, there is enough of wiggle room in this northern African territory region for the Greeks to decide we can expand into Africa. Now, there's already a city over here called Cyrene. Pronounce wash to please to verify your Southern Baptist. Hey, Nursberger. Southern Baptists would pronounce it worsh. There's an R in that word. You don't know that there's an R in that word, but there is totally an R in that word in Mississippi. Hey, Nursberger, how's it going, my friend? When are you going to stream again? You haven't streamed in forever. That's correct. Exactly how your father says it. So sometime around this region in the 520s or so, the colonies of Greece decide, or the colonizers of Greece decide that they want to move over into the African world. Like, we're gonna go over here. And there's this disruption in Libya because of this fighting with Hasdrubal and the Libyans, but also the expansion of the Persians under Darius. So there seems to be some wiggle room here, and the Greeks are also feeling a little bit of a pinch because the Persians are moving in on their world as well, because Darius also invades Greece, if you remember that stuff, or if you don't, that's okay. Darius invades Greece. So the Spartans, actually a prince of Sparta, a guy named Darius, decides that he's going to found a colony down here in Africa. And the Carthaginians are like, dude, we've already told you Greeks, you got to stay out of our territory. So the Carthaginians have to go fight Spartans. And they run them off, but that doesn't dissuade Darius completely. And he ends up over here in Sicily going, I'll just make a colony over here. Yeah, so then they have to go fight him over there. And eventually they run this guy off. But it's weird. You never really hear about Carthaginians and Spartans fighting. You usually only really hear about Spartans fighting in the movie 300, but they were expansion-minded too. The Greeks were looking at a way to try to make their world bigger. Well, at the end of Hasdrubal's reign, there is a big rebellion over on the island of Sardinia, over here. The area itself had never really completely fallen under their control. They had port cities there, but especially the interior of the island is very mountainous and hard to hold on to. It's hard to get rid of those mountain people. And they don't like the fact that the Carthaginians are there. They are ethnically very different than the Carthaginians, so they rebel. And Hasdrubal has to go try to fight off these guys. And he gets to Sardinia, and the battles are going fairly well, but he actually ends up getting killed. which kind of throws things a little bit into a mix because at that point, there's a new player in town, and it's not really a good thing to be losing when there are new tokens on the board. And that new token is the city of Rome. The Romans at that point had expanded. Of course, 509 BC is the beginning of the Roman Republic, and in the same year, Hasdrubal's successor, a guy named Hamilcar, such great names. Hamilcar is going to make a treaty with Rome, and this is a big deal in Roman history. This is one of the first big international treaties that they make, so all the Roman writers are like, oh yes, this was the defining moment in Roman history where everybody was treated as equals, and of course the Carthaginians recognized the power of the Roman Empire. This is a bit of a joke. Rome was more or less a bump in the road at that point, and Carthage just wanted to make sure that they weren't going to make more trouble. If there was trouble in Sardinia, they did not also need trouble on the Italian coast. And just to be direct, I've missed photos. We need to roll back a little bit here. Let me look at some photos. I've been rambling and I've neglected to show you pictures. Okay, so here's the Phoenician trade routes. Boom. But here is our map. This is in 550, so this is actually before we have the Romans showing up. This would have been under the beginning of Mago's reign, and you can see here we've got the Phoenicians and oh yeah, man, I love maps. You know I love maps. You guys know that I love the maps. But you can see that the Phoenician colonies had expanded pretty far. Got all the way over into the Iberian Peninsula. You can see the definition here between the Greek side of Sicily and the Carthaginian side of Sicily. Learn me, please. Ooh, depending on how I interpreted that statement, hunk, that might require some... Never mind, I'm not even going to go there. Some not safe for stream material. I will teach you and you can learn. I don't know if I necessarily want to learn you, though. You are pretty dreamy, though, so I don't know. I do quite love my wife. Anyway, here's the treaty that we get signed here. You can see that Rome has expanded on Italy. This is the period of time where this would have been the 509 treaty. You could see how big Carthage is. It's here called Cartagena. And of course, Roma and Syracuse and Taranto and Marsiglia. It's in Italian. But you can see that Rome has expanded. The Etruscans are losing territory. Around this time, the Carthaginians are going to also claim Corsica to add that to the pair. But this is the borders of the treaty that the Romans brag about so much. They're like, oh yes, we've got landing privileges on the islands in the Mediterranean. And Carthage is like, just stay out of our realm. You stay in your little bubble and we'll stay in our big, much larger bubble. And you do you, man. You go fight those Etruscans and you go fight the Greeks and do your thing because, well, just to be honest, you're kind of a nobody. But that's life. Rome is going to put it back on him in just a little bit. Anyway, so Hamilcar, pretty big guy, expands stuff. He's also going to be the king that finally gets Carthage out from under Libya. Hamilcar is a pretty strong ruler, and he rules for a long time. He's on the throne for 40 years. 30 years. I can't math. From 510 to 480. He's a pretty powerful guy. He's going to get out from under Libya, more or less bring them under the sway of the Carthaginians, and he's going to think that maybe he's the one that can finally take over Sicily. And this is going to be the first move in what becomes almost 200 years worth of fighting between the city of Syracuse and the city of Carthage over the island of Sicily. Sounds like a car full of Mark Hamills. Is that like Mark Hamill as the Joker, and then Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, and Mark Hamill as Cockknocker from Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back? And they're all in a car together and they're singing. Is it like Alanis Morissette's Ironic, where it's just all different versions of Mark Hamill and they're singing in the car, all the Hamills? His last name has 2 L's, by the way. So that's great. Why not? Is there like angry Luke Skywalker drinking blue milk? Oh, you haven't seen any of those new movies yet. I've seen all the new Star Wars. I think my wife has seen episode 7, but not 8 or 9. I don't think she's necessarily missing very much. Anyway, Hamilcar decides that he's just going to be the guy that finally takes over Sicily. It's time to put Sicily under the control of the Carthaginians. He's going to be the one that does it. So the way that he's going to do this is by targeting the government of the city of Syracuse. Syracuse is a pretty big city. It was the largest city on the island of Sicily. It sits right down here. And the city itself was kind of politically unstable at the time. And Hamilcar decides that he's going to pick a guy that is sort of pro-Carthage. And he thinks maybe if we can get this tyrant on the throne in Syracuse, perhaps he'll just sort of let us take over the rest of the island and then we'll all be happy and we can run Sicily. The problem is it goes really badly. He invades with a pretty big army. This is in 480 BC, by the way. He invades with a big army and it doesn't go so great. He doesn't win so well and he loses pretty badly in the attempt to get out of the island. There's a really big battle where he gets caught and killed. And this is really humiliating for the Carthaginians because they lost to a city, like one city. You can't unthink it. Hamilcar. Oh, my wife. So, old Hamilcar, well, he's dead. So, boom. Now he's gone. So you don't have to think about him anymore, at least for a minute. So, the next, again, this is the first Sicilian War. There are 7 Sicilian Wars, by the way. And we're not going to go through every single one of them because, honestly, a lot of them start with, and the Greeks did this, and the Carthaginians did that, and then they beat each other up, and then neither side won. Hamilcar forever. Is this like Batman Forever? Are there stormtroopers with nipple armor? Anyway, around this time, Etruscans are going to completely fall to Rome. So there's a big ally of the Carthaginians that's gone. Now, the Carthaginians do make more treaties with the Romans, but they're never going to be as friendly with the Romans as they were with the Etruscans. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like Carthage tried to intervene against Rome to protect their Etruscan allies, which is not really surprising because Carthage has a pretty bad habit of abandoning allies. It doesn't gain them a lot of international love. But this humiliation of Hamilcar is going to cause a pretty big change in the government structure of Carthage. And around this time, there's going to be the rise of a group called the 104. Yeah, that seems like super ominous, doesn't it? Basically what this is the Carthaginian version of the Senate. And Carthage becomes what is effectively a republic at this point. And kings become elected officials, and they don't use the title king anymore. They use the title Shofet. which is either judge or ruler. It's also going to kind of be a catch-all term, which could also mean general, because a lot of these Shofets are going to be sent off to fight battles. And this is going to be a pretty marked turning point for the Carthaginians, because they're going to lose a lot of power when Hamilcar goes down. They're going to change over their government. They're going to run out a lot of the old Magonid nobles that had supported the Magonid line. So there's a big sort of sea change in power. And a bunch of their Iberian territory, the territory over in Spain, is going to take this opportunity to sort of not necessarily completely break away and become independent, but definitely become much more at-home minded. And especially this sort of interior region of Spain right in here, it has a lot of gold and silver mines. And that's really going to hurt the pocketbook of the Carthaginians, because they're not going to be able to rely on these big gold and silver shipments to sort of prop them up. And then this new guy shows up in Syracuse, and his name is Dionysius. Dionysius the First. He is the tyrant of Syracuse, and this guy believes that Carthage has to go. He thinks that Syracuse should in fact be the dominant power on Sicily, and that Sicily should be united under his rule. This guy is universally looked at as a giant jerk throughout history. He's going to start 4 separate wars against the Carthaginians. This is the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th Sicilian wars. There are issues with plague during his rule. Plague breaks out on Sicily, but it also gets over into Carthage. They seem sus. This dude is super sus. They fight. Dionysus, all of his wars basically come to nothing. The Carthaginians are going to spend decades fighting this guy, and neither side can really push the other side off. It always comes down to the Carthaginians have a big navy, and the Syracusans don't. They have to sort of rely on the Greeks, but the territory on the island of Sicily that Syracuse controls has really big walls, and the Carthaginians can't siege them long enough to break in. So if neither side can really gain victory, neither side's really going to gain victory. And the only changes that happen are really just based around surprise attacks. You know, like sometimes Syracuse will just build up for a few years and then not do anything and then just attack like out of nowhere. And they'll be able to take a few cities before the Carthaginians can get their act together. But then the Carthaginians will just push them back out, and then maybe they'll do the attacking next time. This is all going to turn over and over and over into stalemates. But a particular thing starts happening during this period of time where there is a lot of burden placed on these Shofets. And it's almost expected that if you do a bad job, you're going to be in trouble. A lot of these Shofets get kicked out of Carthage. Some of them, like a guy named Himilco. There's a Shofet named Himilco that goes to fight Dionysus and loses so badly that he kills himself. Like, he doesn't even get back to Carthage. Like, he knows that if he gets back to Carthage, he's going to have a bad go of things. Because the 104 are not forgiving. They're going to hold stuff against you. There's another Shofet named Mago. This is Mago the Third, who kills himself in the 6th war. This is after Dionysus dies. And it's weird. Like, you would not expect... It's almost... The closest thing that I can think of, and this is going to be a bit of a stretch chronologically, but it's almost like honor killings in Japan. Like, if you did such a bad job, you're going to have to regain your honor by dying. Couldn't he just move to the Swiss Alps and claim to have killed himself? Let's go to Argentina, right? It's warm over there. They don't. There are multiple Shophets that kill themselves. Some of them end up exiled. And by the time we get to the middle 300s, especially the 340s, you can tell that some of these Shophets get really sick of getting pushed around by the 104. There's a Shofet named Hanno III in 340 who tries to lead a rebellion against the 104. He gets captured, he gets put on trial, and he gets murdered. Well, I guess it's not murdered if you put them on trial. I don't know how you would say that. He gets killed for treason. And then 30 years later, another guy named Bomilcar. There you go, Brittany. If you like Hamilcar. In 310, this guy named Bomilcar tries to rebel against the 104 and restore the powerful monarchy. And that dude ends up crucified. You don't mess with the 104. They run things with an iron fist, or 208 iron fists. Wasn't he one of the dwarves in the Hobbit? Who the heck is Bomel? One of the gods of the Carthaginians, I believe. Does his car mean something like leader or king or something? I can't remember exactly what car means. I should know all of the Phoenician language, I guess, but I don't. I think you might be meaning bomber. There's Biffer and Bomber, and yeah. Not to go too much of a tangent, but you recently wondered if people who lived back then believed in past lives and reincarnation. You feel like most people who know that now always say they were really interesting people in their past lives, despite the majority of people living and dying on this planet being manual laborers and hunter-gatherers. Yeah, exactly. There were people at this time that believed in reincarnation. That was mostly an Asian thing. If we're looking at this particular time period in history, where are we? We're at 310. Okay, so at 310 BC, you had several reincarnation based religions. You had the various actual independent religions that all get lumped together by the British white people and called Hinduism. Stuff like Ganapatya and all the different versions of Hinduism. So Hinduism believed in reincarnation. Buddhism, at this point you have... this is going to really test... I don't know if I can say this without putting on the adventure hat. Buddhism had begun to spread over into China around this time, but it really hadn't developed into Mahayana Buddhism yet. So there was really only one big version of Buddhism, but it believed in reincarnation at this time. There's also Jainism, another religion in India that believed in reincarnation. And by the 500s BC, there might have been a few independent tribal groups in South America that would go on one day to become the Andean population, which we normally call the Inca, that might have believed in reincarnation. The Inca people in South America had an idea of reincarnation. So, yeah. You were a Cherokee princess in a past life, and you were also the great-grandmother of 98% of Americans? Yes. Yeah, my great-grandmother was a Choctaw princess. Really? That's great. That's because Choctaws didn't have kings. So how'd that work? The Sikh did not exist at that time. They're not around until much, much later. They're actually fairly new in the regional religion world over there. Hannibal car, Bommel car, clown car. Okay. You're taking me back to college religious courses. I've forgotten so much about that stuff. Hey, man, if you ever have any questions about religion, feel free to throw them in. I don't mind being derailed. I studied religion since I started taking college classes, and that's my undergraduate is in history and religion, and I've studied religion a lot. So, you made me check the etymology of justicar because now you need to know, and knowing is half the battle. MC Foreign, this is informative. Hey, absolutely, and welcome, MC Foreign. If you ever have any questions, throw them in there. We'll talk about whatever. Justicar, adjudicar. I'm guessing that it's some version, something that comes out of either Phoenician or maybe even Greek. Dun, 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 dun. Thanks for the follow, MC Foreign, and welcome to the adventure. Hey, Edgy, how's it going? Do you have a rel? I have a religion. I don't... How do I say this? I don't know if it's my place to talk about my religion in a public forum quite like this. I have to be very careful about some of the stuff that I post. I work for a public college in southern Mississippi, and everything that I say here on stream might be held against me in the court of law. So I need to be careful about how I talk about things, because in South Mississippi, religion is something that gets people riled up. And Satanist. Hey, Motivic, how's it going? Vicar, there we are. If you want to talk about religion on a one-on-one thing, man, we can talk about some stuff. But I don't know if this is my forum for that. You worship the flying spaghetti monster? Have you been touched by his noodly appendage? Doing great. Really excited to hop on. Oh, that's great. That's great. Good to see you. We're talking about Carthage tonight, but I mean, we can talk about, kind of whatever. I have a lot of respect for the people that do the flying spaghetti monster stuff. I think that what they're doing, while starting off tongue-in-cheek, actually has a important thing to teach everybody about what actual equality means and what source criticism means. You're a Reformed believer in the invisible pink unicorn. Do you talk like a pirate? Do you dress like a pirate? Anyway. So these Sicilian wars, the Carthaginians, they're fighting all these wars with Sicily. Again, this stretches for like over 100 years. These guys are beating the mess out of each other, but at the end of it, it's the way that it started. The boundaries between the Carthaginian part of Sicily and the Syracuse part of Sicily are effectively the same. They fought over this island, which is not so big. I mean, let's see how big the island is. I don't actually know this off the top of my head, but here's the great thing about Google. We can use the ruler tool. I write sins, not elephants. Yeah! Raising your hand over here for all the secular humanists in the world represent. I have definite beliefs, and I hold my beliefs very dear to myself. But I don't know, man. I'm not ashamed of what I believe in, but I also don't know if I want to turn my history platform into a religion argument. So let's see how wide Sicily is. Sicily is 145 miles wide. And the Carthaginians and the Syracusans fight over this for from 480 BC until 306 BC. So what is that? 100 or for 74 years? Get him to talk about religion when he's building mechs. I could talk about any religion, and what really drives some people in South Mississippi just bonkers. I can do this to my students sometimes, and it drives them crazy. I can argue points from multiple religious bases of knowledge. So regardless of what position or what religion a student takes or doesn't like, I can argue from both sides of that. It drives them crazy. It drives them crazy. Oh man, fun times though. Fun times. I got one student so mad at me one time that we were talking about Buddhism. That edgy person, random world capital, Southeast Asia, like anything in Southeast Asia or all of Southeast Asia. Cambodia is Phnom Penh, Vietnam is Hanoi, Laos is Vientiane, Thailand is Bangkok. What else is over in Southeast Asia? Bangladesh is Dhaka. That's enough. You only get one, and I just gave you like 7. Philippines is Manila. Malaysia is Kuala Lumpur. India is Delhi. Thailand is Bangkok. Borneo is an island. It doesn't have Borneo is an island that has like 5 countries or 4 countries on it. Singapore's capital is Singapore. It's just one kind of city state, and it's illegal to chew gum there. The entire country banned gum. So, I know lots of world capitals. That's one of my weird, like, I don't know, kind of like knee-jerk things that my brain just sort of crams up there. You just don't have to get... It's legal. You just don't get caught. Right, exactly. So, yeah, my brain holds on to random data. It just all just kind of gets mushed up in there and it gets stuck. So, yeah. Okay. So by the time we get to the 300s, what's going on? Well, the battles between Syracuse and Carthage are clearly not going anywhere. So they kind of decide to just kind of call it off for a little bit. Like, honestly, can we just get along for a little while? And that works for a bit, but while they're calming down, Carthage is just getting stronger. And this is kind of scaring Syracuse. So what ends up happening around the 279, 278 mark is that, well, Syracuse has to start looking for pick a place, a thing, a topic, just whatever. Or you can just say, just pick whatever. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So Syracuse starts reaching out to other territories. If it can't beat Carthage alone, maybe it needs a new friend. American Midwest. Let's see. The biggest mall in the United States is in Minnesota. That's not necessarily a history fact. American Midwest. There is a really cool, very large Native American mound in southern Ohio called Serpent Mound. That's part of a group of people called the Adena Hopewell culture. Really cool stuff. I would love to go to Serpent Mound. I'm trying to convince some friends to go up there with me whenever COVID doesn't work. Random history fact about Rhode Island. Rhode Island was initially founded by a guy named Roger Williams, who was kicked out of Massachusetts for preaching that Christianity should be shared with Native American people. And the people there did not care for that, so they said, you go live amongst those Native American people. So he did. And he founded the colony of Rhode Island, which is actually the first colony in the New World period that offered true and open religious freedom. Dude, I do this for a living. I am the bar trivia generator. Smallest country in the world is the Vatican. Italy has another micro country called San Marino in it. Next one up is Liechtenstein, Andorra, Monaco. Capital of San Marino is San Marino. Capital of Liechtenstein is Vaduz. Capital of Andorra is Andorra la Vella. A small, not well-known place. Now I start to feel like I'm a human version of Google, and now you're just like poking at me to see when I don't know something. I don't know everything. Isn't there a barge that's a country somewhere? Do you mean that big like platform that a bunch of hippies built in the 60s and 70s out in the middle of the ocean? That's like wasn't it like a rundown oil platform or something that they turned into Sealand. There we go. Yeah, good times. I'm feeling lucky. I love you guys. This is good times. Now you're just wondering how much garbage is up here. And the answer is a lot. A lot. So Syracuse has to go find friends. And it's just so happening that around this time, this is after Alexander the Great's empire has broken up, and a lot of his generals called their little pieces of his empire for themselves. And there's a guy named Pyrrhus. This guy, look at that handsome devil. Pyrrhus is the king of a place called Epirus. And he is interested in expanding his territory. And Syracuse just so happens to want the Carthaginians to die. And so they go, hey Pyrrhus, you want to come over here and help us beat up the Carthaginians, and maybe we can work out some territory exchange, and maybe we can make some... Oh yeah, Pyrrhus is everywhere, man. Pyrrhus was already fighting over in Rome, over in Roman territory. Actually, it was in southern Italy at that point. It wasn't technically Roman territory. Let me zoom in on the map here. So Pyrrhus's kingdom is right over here. Epirus is this sort of northern and western part of Greece. Magna Graecia at that point was still Greek colonies, but Rome was expanding right down on it. So Pyrrhus wanted to take over this territory, and hey, Sicily's just right there. And here's where everybody's favorite ancient war devils show up. Anybody? What does Pyrrhus have? Pyrrhus has the elephants. Oh yes. So Pyrrhus loads up his elephants, and actually they're not technically his elephants. They're technically on loan from Ptolemy II. Mormons. No, Mormons are not around yet. At that point, according to the Mormon timeline, the big kingdoms of North America would be thriving, though. I was told there would be no elephants. The name of the title of the stream is "I Write Sins, Not Elephants." Well, see, here's the pun of the joke. Well, no, let's wait for the actual moment to put that in. Well, yeah, let's just wait till that actually is topically appropriate. So here comes Pyrrhus. Pyrrhus is going to invade Sicily. He's going to bring this big fleet of ships. He's got a whole bunch of men, and he's got the elephants. And Carthage really doesn't know what to do against the elephants, and they get whipped pretty bad. Pyrrhus takes over most of this northern chunk of the territory, and they're starting to kind of curl back down this way. And the only city that kind of stops them is this big Carthaginian city called Lilybaeum, which has gigantic fortified position walls because of all of the fighting that they had done for the last gaboodles of years. And at that point, the Roman war doesn't go very well, and Pyrrhus kind of has to bug out. So he shows up, he beats up the Carthaginians, he shows the power of the war elephant, and then he's like, oh, guys, gotta book it. Sorry, Syracuse, hope you can hold this territory. And he goes back to fight against the Romans. And at that point, the Carthaginians just take everything back, but they have learned something. They have learned that elephants are a thing, and that you can use them in war. So guess what the Carthaginians like to do now? Dun, 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 dun. They like to use the elephant. So they're going to be in an interesting position because the war between Pyrrhus and Rome goes badly for the Greeks. And this region down here in southern Italy, Magna Graecia, is going to fall to the Romans. And Rome at that point is going to control the entire peninsula. And now the Romans want Sicily. Everybody just wants Sicily, right? The Carthaginians were there first. They fought 200-something years to hold on to this. And they have the African elephants, which are bigger. Correct. I write sins, not dynasties. There's a specific moment where that's going to make a lot more sense. When we get to that particular moment, I'll call it out. So, dad dang it, Sicily. So here's what happens. The city of Syracuse really wants to regain all of the territory that Carthage has just taken. And there are some mercenaries that show up at a city called Messina. These mercenaries are called the Mamertines. Dun, 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 Mamertines! Anyway, the Mamertines take over the city of Messina. And Syracuse does not like the idea that these guys have taken over this city because it's pretty close to Syracuse and they think that it might cause them trouble. So the Syracuse army starts attacking the Mamertines. Well, the Mamertines go, wait, we took this city fair and square. And so this is a very important moment in history. The Mamertines reach out to Carthage and to Rome. And they say, hey, you guys come help us. You both don't like Syracuse. Help us out. And the Carthaginians are like, hey, if you're going to fight Syracuse, let's load up and go. So they send people immediately. They get to the city of Messina. They run off the Syracusans, and they put a garrison of Carthaginian troops there. And they say, all right, now we're buddies. And the Mamertines are like, okay, fine, we're buddies. And then Rome has an interesting decision. Rome knows that the Mamertines had called for aid. And they know that if they go down to the city of Messina, that they're going to start picking trouble with Carthage, because Carthage now has an army garrison there. But Rome just kind of decides, what are we going to do but fight? We're going to go down and help them, right? We're going to help them kick out the Carthaginians who have actually come in and are now dominating their city. They wanted to be free. Now the Carthaginians are like making them be a part of this. Yeah, dadgummit, it's just a mess. So the Romans send an army, and the Carthaginians are like, dudes, you understand that you're like breaking all of the truces with this, right? And Rome's like, they asked for our help. And Syracuse is like, hey, yeah, sick it to them. And Rome's like, oh, yeah, we're going to kill you too. So Rome takes over Syracuse and forces them to feed their army. This is humiliating for Syracuse. Syracuse is like, yeah, Rome's going to come get you. Ha, ha, ha. And then they get taken over and their food is diverted to the Roman army. But this is going to start something called the First Punic War, which is a pretty big mess. And before we get into that, let me show you what the situation on the ground looked like. So before all of this started, you can see here's Messana. This is the city where everything got started. Here's Syracuse. It holds a little territory right around it. Oops, sorry. Here we go. Carthage has gotten most of island of Sicily. It's got Corsica. It's got Sardinia. It's got this northern stuff. It's adding some stuff back over here. Carthage is pretty big and pretty scary. But... Okay, so first Punic War. 23 years worth of fighting. It starts because the Romans are kind of jerk faces about stuff. They knew that they were going to start a war. They didn't really have a problem with that. They get down, they take over Syracuse. OBS will just stop streaming for him and he thinks everything is fine. Yeah, I was talking for like a minute and my wife yells at me, "Hey, the stream is down." At least you don't have the Blake's issues that gives him the blue screen of death. Oh man, that's horrible. When are they not though? Are you saying like when are the Romans not kind of jerky? Oh yeah, man. I don't know what I would do without my wife. My wife is pretty friggin' amazing. I don't know if you have a wife or if you have a spouse, but my spouse is better than your spouse. We can argue about that one. I'll totally fight you on that one. Anyway, so the Roman army on the island of Sicily has the advantage of Syracuse's big walls and its food supply. So the Roman army on Sicily is going to be able to pretty consistently beat the Carthaginian army, even though the Carthaginians sometimes have elephants. So this is like the few time in history where the elephants just don't do the deal. Thesis debate of who has the better wife. But here's the thing. The Carthaginians have a fleet. And the Carthaginian fleet is impressive. It's full of very fast ships. Their rowers are incredibly skilled. They had fought sea battles for hundreds of years. And Rome really doesn't have that big of a fleet. So for the first 5 or 6 years of the war, it's basically just a stalemate where the Romans will try to do something and they get a little bit of an edge, but then the Carthaginian fleet swoops in and just wrecks their day. And so the Romans are like, what can we do? Let's build a fleet. But here's the thing. The Romans don't have access to a lot of good boats, and they don't have sort of natural boat building skill. So they have to try to find boats. And the boats that they use for their original models are sort of big, clunky trade vessels. So they don't really have much of a competitive edge at the beginning. They build a lot of ships and then they lose a lot of ships. The Romans lose so many ships in the First Punic War. It's crazy. And they figure out that even though they have a fleet, they still can't really compete against the Carthaginian fleet because the Carthaginian fleet is just better. They have better navy, they have better tactics, they have better skills. So the Romans have to think, all right, what do we do better than the Carthaginians? And the answer is fight on land. Here's the problem. There's no land in the water unless you go under the water, and nobody's got scuba gear and you can't fight underwater at that point. So how do you make the land show up on the water? And the answer is this thing. Now, this is a model. It's only a model. But this is called a corvus. And the thing that we're looking at that's important is this guy. This guy is a big platform, and it sits on a swivel on the front deck of the ship, and it can be raised and lowered, and it's got this big honking metal stick on the front of it, or this pike. Corvus. And the goal of this particular device is for the Romans to sail their ship up next to a Carthaginian ship and then drop that platform down and then walk their soldiers across and fight on the deck of the ship. Pretty nice, huh? Here's the thing, though. Yeah, Corvus, Corvus. Here, I'll type it. Oh, you can't see because I'm still showing images. Hold on a second. Boop. Corvus, like crow. So this Corvus platform or gangplank is built wide enough for a Roman cohort to march across. So they load these big ships up with soldiers that are effectively at that point Marines. You float up next to the ship, you drop this big thing down on them, the big metal spike pokes through their deck so that they can't get away, and then you march the Romans soldiers across and fight them in their ship, and the Romans really start getting an edge from this. They play to their strengths. Here's the problem with the Corvus, though. With that thing hanging out the front of your ship, it makes your ship front heavy, which means that you have to be really, really careful when you're navigating around, because if your ship is kind of pointing down in the water, you're going to run ashore much easier because you don't get that kind of scrape. That you just kind of get a... And when the Carthaginians figure that out, they start trying to counteract the Corvus ability by trying to pull the Romans into shallow water or to water that has really heavy currents where the rudders of their boat can't steer very well because the front of their boat is weighted down. So even though the Romans come up with this thing that is going to sort of level the playing field on the water, the Carthaginians are going to counter by using different tactics, and we kind of get back to stalemate. Yeah, and both by the time we get to the 240s, especially like the 248, 247 mark, both sides had, are there no projectile type stuff at this point? There were big kind of crossbow looking things, but those had not really been brought onto the decks of ships yet. You're not really going to see very many of those even in land battles. Catapults are not really big of a part of the Roman military at this point. They're going to be pretty soon, but not so much. And on the water, you never really see catapults becoming too big of a thing. You get the ballista, which is kind of like the big shoot, the big pointy pike thing at you that's about yay long. That's basically a small tree that's been whittled down with a pointy metal tip on the end of it. Did Greek fire exist? Not at this point yet. That's coming a few hundred years later. But that's mostly used in the eastern half of the Mediterranean. You see some of it being done over in the West, but that's later in the life of the Roman Empire. So, coming very soon to a war theater near you, jellied fire that we can squirt out of a bellows and run it over a match that squirts. Basically, it's an ancient flamethrower. More specifically, it's an ancient napalm thrower, which is pretty wicked stuff and takes out ships like crazy because the fire sticks to you. Yeah. We still don't exactly know who came up with that or how exactly they made that. So, interesting things. Anyway, so by the time we get to the 240s, both sides are having to resort to mercenaries, which are not popular because, you gotta pay these people. They're not necessarily loyal to you. And by this point, the war had dragged on for almost 20 years, and both sides are running out of money. How does one say that's gotta hurt in ancient Greek? I don't know. We would need KP here for that one. He knows a lot more ancient Greek than I do. So Carthage is going to get a bit of a leg up with a new leader, and we're going to have to, I guess, set Brittany off again. This guy is part of a new ruling line. He's not from the Magonid line. He's from the Barcid line. But his name is Hamilcar Barca. And here you see Hamilcar Barca as sort of dressed up like Hercules. But, here's the image, the good old-fashioned war elephant that has sort of become ubiquitous for Carthaginians as a guy on a big old elephant. And you can tell here that this is clearly an African elephant because the ear goes all the way over this guy. Big old ears designate African elephant. So, Hamilcar Barca, not Hamilcar Margon. So Hamilcar Barca is going to take over as Shofet in 247. And he's got an interesting strategy. He thinks that he can take the Romans out. And the way that he's going to take the Romans out is effectively dragging them into these perpetual small battles where the Romans, who had to move everything from Italy down to Syracuse, if they lost 10 or 12 soldiers, it cost them a lot more to replace those than if the Carthaginians lost 10 or 12 soldiers. If the Carthaginians burned down one of their supply depots, Rome had to move all that stuff down from Italy to Sicily. And the Carthaginians and Hamilcar Barca understood this, right? So he launches this campaign of what is effectively guerrilla fighting. And his goal is to bankrupt the Romans. If he can pester them and nip around their edges and get them to chase him around and expend money and expend lives and have to build more fleets and have to send more stuff, he can run them out of money. And he does. He runs the Roman treasury down to zero. And you would think at that point that Rome would be done and that would be the end of the war. But Rome does something really weird at this point. The Senate of Rome and the consuls at the time reach out to the rich families of Rome, and they basically make them this argument. Here's the deal. If we defeat the Carthaginians, we will end up with the island of Sicily. So, if you, rich people of Rome, give us money, the government of Rome, as a loan, we will pay you back dividends in rich farmland on the island of Sicily. And the rich families of Rome like this deal. They go, that sounds pretty nice. Are you going to win? And they go, of course we're going to win. They didn't know that they were going to win, but they end up winning. They build this giant fleet, and they move away from the Corvus and the heavy ship to the lighter, more maneuverable ships that the Carthaginians were using. They load up another army, and when they get down to Sicily, they wreck the Carthaginians. Because here's the thing. As Hamilcar Barca was stringing out the Romans, he was also stringing out the Carthaginian bank account. So both sides had sort of hit a financial limit. So Rome shows up with another army. Hamilcar Barca doesn't have one to respond with. And the Carthaginians kind of get stuck. And they go, crap, where are we going to get enough money to build a whole new army? And they reach out to the Ptolemies and they say, hey, Ptolemies, would you loan us a whole bunch of money? They ask for 2,000 talents, which is a gosh awful amount of money. And the Ptolemies are like, you guys are losing. We're not going in for no, we're not giving you that much money. And Hamilcar has to fight with the ragtag remains of his army, and the Romans win. And when the Romans win, they get to dictate the terms. And the terms are, you are going to give up Sicily. And the Carthaginians have to. They had fought for Sicily since the 1100s BC. And Rome took it from them in 23 years. That's got to sting. And oh, did it sting. Hamilcar Barca goes back home. He does not get Shofet. He does not get reappointed Shofet. He, in fact, gets kind of disgraced. And that's until things get bad. Because when they have to give up all of Sicily. Of course, they lose that income, but they also have to make these agreements that they're not going to start trouble or sail their armies or move war materials around anywhere near the Italian coastline. So that limits how far they can even project their own power. And Corsica and Sardinia decide that it's time for them to rebel. Because, well, hey, they're pretty close to Italy. And they're full of mercenaries. A lot of the mercenaries that the Carthaginians had sort of paid off to come fight against Rome came from Corsica and Sardinia. Well, darn. What you gonna do? So they call Hamilcar Barca and they go, "Hey, can you go handle those mercenary guys? They seem to be afraid of you. Will you go handle them?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know. Can I go handle them? You didn't give me Shofit again." They're like, "Just shut up and go fix the problem." So this is what's called the Mercenary War in 237 BC. He goes up, he starts fighting on Corsica and Sardinia, and he gets the mercenaries pretty much under control. And then Rome goes, hey, what are you doing over here? What are you doing with these armed people close to our territory? What are you doing on these port cities that are over in Italian waters? I should have made an Old Greg reference. What you doing in my waters? I don't know if anybody knows who Old Greg is. If you don't know who Old Greg is, you should totally Google Old Greg and watch that clip. It's from the Mighty Boosh. I've referred to Old Greg before. Anyway, Rome calls breach, and they go, "Oh, you're breaking you're breaking the treaty. Terms of the treaty are broken. We're going back to war. We're back to war." And Hamilcar Barca goes, "We don't want to fight you anymore. We're broke. We just spent more money putting down mercenaries. What do you want? What is it going to take for you to shut up and go away?" And Rome's like, "We'll take Corsica and Sardinia." So what does Carthage have to do? They have to give up Corsica and Sardinia, islands that they had held for the last 350 years. Rome took it from them in 1 year over a technicality, which was kind of like a really bad loophole that didn't really apply, but Rome was in the position of strength at that point, and Carthage couldn't argue with them. So now Carthage is down 3 islands. Hamilcar Barca is once again in a bit of trouble. He gets back home and they're like, "Dude, we sent you up there to fix it, not make it worse." And he's like, "What the heck you want me to do? I can't just pull armies out of thin air. It doesn't work like that. This isn't magic." And they go, "How are you going to fix this?" And so Hamilcar Barca puts on his thinking cap and he goes, "Okay, what are we going to do? Good gosh, what are we going to do? What about Spain?" Now, the Carthaginians had held territory down here on the southern coastline for a long time, but there used to be territory up in the middle part here that they had lost back when the first Hamilcar got wrecked. And that area was full of gold and silver. And Hamilcar Barca thinks, if we could take back Spain, we could rebuild our treasury and we could get an influx of population. So let's go try to do that. These Iberian tribes, they're disorganized, they're not unified. We should be able to beat these guys up. So he goes over. He brings in what little bit of army they have. They start expanding, and it turns out they can take Iberia. And they take a big chunk of it. And they take so much of it, in fact, that Rome starts getting a little scared. They're like, "Oh, crap, Carthage is this is going to be like the Empire Strikes Back. We're not going to lose this one, or we're not going to win this one." So they go to Carthage and they work a deal out. And they pick a river right over here. And they say, okay, this river is going to be the boundary between Roman potential territory and Carthage potential territory. And you can't go on that side, and we won't go on that side. And Hannibal Barca's like, fine. Rome hadn't even expanded close to that territory yet. They weren't even out of northern Italy yet. But they were afraid that what would happen is that the Carthaginians would take over all of Spain and then move up into southern France and then end up in their back door. And Hannibal Barca would have been fine with that. But here's where Rome gets jerk-faced again. So Hannibal Barca is actually going to die. He dies fighting some unknown Iberians. And his son, Hannibal Barca, is going to take over. And yes, this is that Hannibal, the guy with the elephants in the Alps and stuff. But we're not quite there yet. So Hannibal is going to sort of take over as Shofet. He's going to get elected Shofet. Carthage is rebuilding its stuff. The money's coming in from Spain. The armies are getting back together. The navy is getting back together. And Rome is freaking out. So Rome's going to do something to start a war. So the boundary was right around in here. There was a city on the Carthaginian side of the treaty. Rome's going to go make a treaty with that city specifically and say, you are now part of our allies. They weren't supposed to be able to do that. And they exploited a loophole in the treaty to even make some sort of legal fiction that would work. And then when Carthage started expanding into that city said, hey, friends in Rome, come save us. And this is going to start the Second Punic War. Oh, the Second Punic War. This was from 218 to 201 BC. When this war starts, Hannibal was not going to deal with this stuff the way that his dad did. Hannibal is a different individual. He was much more offensive minded. He didn't want to do the small pecking around the edges. He wanted to go for the killing blow. So he's going to load up all of his troops, and he's going to load up all of his elephants. Kaleonuktos, is that good night? Hello, how are you? Random history fact, mercenaries. Mamertines. That was the mercenaries. Oh, here's a good one. The Sultanate of Delhi. A big empire that starts in India was originally started by a group of slave mercenaries called the Mamelukes. And the Mamelukes became the first ruling dynasty of the Sultanate of Delhi. There we go. Sounds delicious. Delhi, DLI, or DLHI. It's in India. Anyway, there's a fun mercenary fact. The Golden Company is undefeated. That's a fictional mercenary fact. It's from Game of Thrones. Anyway, so Hannibal is going to go for the knockout blow. And Hannibal is going to do exactly what the Romans were worried about. He's going to march north. And he's going to march across the Alps and into northern Italy. I should show you the map before I go too much further. I keep forgetting that I have things here to show you. So this is what Roman Carthage looked like prior to the Second Punic War. And you can see how much of Spain they had conquered. And you can see here the Ebro River, which was the boundary line. And you can see here Saguntum, which was the city that Rome made a treaty with when they weren't supposed to. I was thinking of like the Gallic and Iberian mercenaries and the Carthaginian army. Oh, yeah, so you got to be a little bit more specific there. The Gauls were actually just about everywhere at this point. Gallic mercenaries were being used by the Romans, the Carthaginians, various groups inside of Greece, the Macedonians. Gallic mercenaries were being used by the Seleucids, and even a couple of times by the Ptolemies. Those guys got passed around like crazy. Everybody wanted to hire the Gauls because they were crazy, they would fight really well, and they didn't cost very much. Celtiberians. There were Celts, absolutely. The migration pattern of the Celtic people when they first moved into Europe split into a forking pattern. They came in from the kind of Black Sea coastline and got here into the middle of the territory. And one group branched up this way and became the sort of traditional Celts. And then the other group branched down this way and became Celtiberians. And they're ethnically similar and linguistically somewhat similar, but by probably about the 1000s or so BC, they were fairly distinct culturally. Teutatarians, did their parents think hard about that one? That's the Teutatanians. Yeah. So what's the difference between Celts and Britons? Who are the Britons? I'm sorry, I had to. Most of the native inhabitants of the British Isles are Celtic originally. When we say Celtic today, most people think about Irish people, Welsh people, or Scottish people as Celtic. That is not ultimately true. The Britons were a group of people who were mixed between the native people that lived there prior to things like the Roman invasion and then later Roman people that moved in. So the Britons were ethnically Celtish a little bit, or Celtic a little bit, but also had some other European stock. So everybody that is a native originally to the British Isles are Celtic. Or Boston. That's Celtics. Yeah. Oh, those Celtics. They lie. That's not how you pronounce that. Oh, also didn't show you Hannibal. Oh, that's the break screen. Good gracious. I'm getting all excited. So here was the map. This guy is Hannibal. Now, you can't really tell what he looks like very much from that. He's a guy. There's an elephant on the other side. Everybody loves elephants, right? And I'll show you another image of him. There's a famous statue. This is the statue. Here's the thing, though. This is very much a Roman interpretation of Hannibal. If you Google Hannibal and look for images, you will see this statue all over the place. Whether or not this is actually what Hannibal looked like, that's a different story. We're not 100% sure. That likeness, is that the same likeness as this guy? There are some similarities, but the Romans were pretty big on finding people that they thought were kind of cool and then sort of making it look like their own thing. Like, oh, look, he was actually a lot more Roman than everybody thinks. Like, we're trying to kind of, steal his glory a bit. And the Romans actually, much later, really admire Hannibal, even though he put a whipping on them. So he moves into the region up here and gets down into the Italian peninsula, and for years just causes all sorts of chaos. These elephants are huge. They eat a lot of food. Hannibal is burning stuff. He's wrecking people's lives. He's moving up and down the peninsula. They're chasing him around. It's a bad scenario. Here's the problem, though. As Hannibal is wrecking all of this stuff, he's also eating all of the food. And his brothers, this guy named Hasdrubal, such a great name there, Hasdrubal, tries a couple of times to get him supplies from Carthage. But the Romans had been smart enough to use their navy to block off the entire coastline of Italy. So Hasdrubal is forced to try to follow the coastline route, and the Romans stop him there too. So even though they're hurting really badly and Hannibal is causing a ton of trouble inside the Italian peninsula, every field that he burns is a field that his soldiers can't eat. And there's only so long that this can go on before both sides just run out of food, and the Romans would be fighting on home territory, right? The part of Hannibal will now be played by an Italian underwear model. You did a paper on this. Cool. Feel free to throw in facts. You thought an older British thespian. Yeah. I heard Hasdrubal. Hasdrubal? Hasdrubal. Here, I'll type it for us. Hasdrubal. You did more of the battles? Ah, gotcha. Did you do the Battle of Zama? Because that's what we're coming up on. So the Romans have a lot of problems on their hands, and some of them are elephants. And one of the consuls that gets elected at this time is a guy named Publius Cornelius Scipio. I don't know if you want to type all of that out. I'll just put Scipio. Boom. Trebia River, Kenai, and Zama. Yes. I got 99 problems and elephants are 98 of them. That's not too far from the truth. A lot of the elephants by this point had died, just to be honest. And Lake Trasimena, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Scipio gets this idea. And the idea is, if Hannibal is in Italy, why don't the Romans attack Carthage? Why don't they invade Africa? That's an interesting concept. And it turns out that it works. Scipio loads up his army and his fleet, and they sail down to this peninsula right here. And this is just to the other side of where Carthage is, and they're going to stage their self. It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. Yeah, exactly. And it does. It pays off in spades. They show up down here, and they land, and they unload, and they fight a couple of battles, and they establish themselves a nice beachhead. And Hannibal at that point has a decision to make. Does he bail out and go home, or does he try to take Rome itself? And his soldiers were tired. They had been in Italy for, at this point, almost a decade. Things were not going so great, and he decides, we're going to go home and protect the homeland. And while he's moving home, Scipio is doing some networking. Over here, there is a group of people called the Numidians. And the Numidians had been under the control of the Carthaginians for quite some time, but they were developing a culture quite unique to themselves. And the guy leading the Numidians was a guy named Massinissa, and we'll talk about the Numidians more next week. And Scipio makes them a deal. The Numidians had a lot of cavalry, and we're talking here about horse cavalry, not elephant cavalry, and especially horseback archers. And Scipio makes a deal with them that if they betray the Carthaginians, that Rome will recognize Numidia as an independent kingdom. And Massinissa's like, does that mean I get to be king? And they're like, heck yeah, that means you get to be king. So the Numidians switch sides. And this is going to be the catastrophic moment for the Carthaginians. Hannibal shows back up. There's a big fight in 201 at a place called Zama. The Battle of Zama. And they line up the elephants, and Scipio actually, curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. Exactly. These are the good quotes. And Scipio figures out how to deal with the elephants. He comes up with this brilliant strategy. You want to know what the strategy is? When the elephants run at you, get out of the way. I'm serious. That's the strategy. When the elephants are charging at you, you just break formation and get out of the way and don't let them trample you. And then you let the elephants run right through the middle of you. Just let them run through. Do you know why you will let them run through? Because behind us are the Numidian cavalry. And they're going to be riding their horses, and they're going to be shooting the elephants in the eyeballs. Elephants can't be very effective if they're all blind, because the Numidians are peppering their faces with arrows from horseback. And when that happens, we already know who's going to win between the Roman infantry and the Carthaginian infantry, because the Romans had been beating the Carthaginian infantry for decades. and Zama is a resounding defeat for the Carthaginians. And this is where the title of the stream comes in, because Hannibal is forced to basically give up the kingdom. At the end of the war, Rome is going to take all of Iberia. Yeah, Hannibal has to basically make the trade deal, or the treaty deal, and then he gets exiled. But we'll talk about that in just a second. We're getting to the great little pun here. So he has to give up all of Iberia. Ooh, I can show you this too, because I have an image. I've got another map. Everybody loves maps. Here's a map. Wing. So they had already given up Corsica and Sardinia. They have to give up all of their territory, and the Numidians become independent. And Hannibal goes back to the city of Carthage, which now really only controls this little strip of land right here. And he comes back home in absolute shame. Now, was it his fault that the Numidians betrayed them? No. Did the Carthaginians care so much about all of the damage that he had done and how close he had come to winning the war? No, because they write sins, not elephants. Now, there is a double level potential pun here. If you're familiar with the song "I Write Sins, Not Tragedies," you'll know the name of the band. And what led me to this particular title was a pun on the name of the band, and I'll give props to whomever can think of what the pun on the name of the band is. And KP can't say anything about it because he was in the chat when I discovered this great pun. So there's a level of fun stuff there. So Hannibal ends up getting sent into exile. One of the greatest generals in the ancient world gets disgraced and sent off packing. So you missed the prompt. So the prompt is, "I write sins, not elephants," which is sort of the response of Carthage to Hannibal when he tries to make his case to not get exiled. He says, "I almost won. I almost had them beat." And then they go, "No, you're exiled. We care more about you screwing up than what you did with those elephants." But if you know the name of the song that I'm punning here, it's "I Write Sins, Not Tragedies." And it's by a particular band. And there's a pun on the name of that band that you can make that would also be a great title for the stream tonight. And I sort of left that open for anybody. And if nobody gets it in a little bit, I'll tell you what it is, because I made myself laugh out loud when I discovered it. "I'd have them beat if it weren't for those..." Punic at the Disco. There you go, Motivic. Well done. Well done. Punic at the Disco. Oh, man. That was great. No moose, not those. Yeah, so I was trying to figure out what I would do with the name of the stream tonight, and I was like, God, what rhymes with elephant? And there are things that rhyme with elephant, but I was like, what are other words that I could use with? And I came up with Punic at the Disco, and I just giggled incessantly for a while. And then KP suggested Punic Attack, like Panic Attack, which would have made a good sense too. And then I said Widespread Punic, which is a hippie jam band. That would have been a pretty fun one. Yeah, so we came up with the band pun, and then I was like, oh man, haven't you people ever heard of Protecting the Gosh Darn Shore? Because all of this stuff was on islands, you know. And then I got to I Write Sins, Not Elephants. So I got very excited about that one, and I felt very accomplished when I came up with that one. I am a simple man with simple pleasures. So Yes, Motivic wins 20 internets. All right, everybody. So that is all that I had suggested for the night. Uh, Anybody want to suggest anything? Anybody want to ask any more questions? Anybody want to redeem any points? Anything like that? Let's slip the puppy of war. Yeah, let me call the puppy real quick. Um, I think she's bringing her bone with her. She has this big bone that she chews on. It's a like a ham bone, or I think it's a beef bone, maybe. Oh yes, she has the bone with her. You want to come up here? Everybody wants to see you. Hey, come here. Come here. What are you doing? Hey, where are you going? Are you going under the table? You gonna come out over here? Hey, come over here. No, you're gonna come back this way? I'm sorry if I'm making everybody sick. Come here. Come here. There you go. There's the big puppy. That is so gross. Hello, Kaylee. Were you sleeping? And just like that, she was gone. Oh, yeah. She just woke up from a deep nap. Oh, the puppy. Yes, that is Let's Slip the Puppy of War. Oh, yes, the big old leg bone. She loves that thing. She will gnaw on that for forever. You came back to a pupper? Oh, yeah. You had some history stuff? Yeah, shoot some questions. You thought it was a baby? Yeah, she's a big puppy baby. She's a big mess is what she is. A giant fluffy mess. Yeah, if anybody has any more mid to late 1800s, sure. Go for it. Ooh, 3 philosophers. Top 3. Oh, my top 3. Oh, that's a tough one. Top 3 favorite philosophers. Wow. I don't know if I've ever thought of that, huh? Marcus Aurelius has got to be up there. Oh no, man, go ahead, ask. MC4 and ask your questions. It's fine. We're done with like my thing. Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, in that order. Um, hmm. That's such a hard question. I don't know if I've ever ranked these in my brain before. Confucius is probably up there. Man, this is tough. Diogenes. Heidegger. uh, Moose, the Carthaginians were they were paganistic. They had a lot of gods that sort of overlapped with the Greek world. They had gods that were equitable to Artemis and Hercules. They also had older Semitic gods like Baal, who was a thunder god. Um, they had huntress gods, or huntress goddess, uh, horse god. That it was very similar to what you would call a Greek set, and the longer they had dealings with the Greeks, the more Hellenistic their religion became. Um, Immanuel Kant. See, I don't really care for Kant that much. I mean, I like his ideas, but I don't. His writing is horrible. If he would just say what he thought, it would be different. No, it's not. There's no such thing as too hard. Homer, Red Cloud's War. You mean like Red Cloud's the Native American that fought against the then burgeoning United States? Schopenhauer, yeah. Yeah, I know about Red Cloud. Is there a specific question that you had about it? Or about him or his wars? Cow. David Hume could out cost you could out consume Schopenhauer and Hegel. Hegel, jeez. Cow did not write the Mandate of Heaven. Cow tried to hijack the Mandate of Heaven. The Mandate of Heaven had been around since the end of the Shang Dynasty. Cow just got all fancy and tried to make it his own. The Mandate of Heaven had been around since the beginning of the Zhou Dynasty, way back in time. Man, I don't the top three things. The top three philosophers is a really, really tough question. I'm going to have to put constraints on it. I'm going to have to put constraints of ancient stuff, because if we carry that up into medieval or modern stuff, there's just too many people to try to rank. I'm going to have to constrain it to ancient. And I might even have to constrain it to, well, I could do Eastern and Western. Let's just do ancient. I'm going to have to say Plato, and I know that seems like lame, lame, but Platonic ideas play a really big role, and they influence so many other things. Neoplatonism, of course, is just humongous. And so much of what we believe today is based on Platonism. And it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily like it's my favorite, but you can't, in a Western culture, you can't get away from Plato. He's just omnipresent. And Plato and Marcus Aurelius. I got to throw Marcus Aurelius in there. His stuff is so good. But he's not necessarily ancient. He's more late antique. See, now I'm even getting I'm getting all wrapped up in my own brain. Man, that's tough. I mean, if we're doing... Okay, let's do Western stuff and we'll do Eastern stuff. Eastern stuff, Eastern ancient, pretty easy for me. Rank 1, 2, 3. Confucius, Zoroaster, the Buddha. In Western ancient history, oh man. Plato. Plato's got to be number one in the West for me. And again, he's not my favorite thing to read, but I mean, he's like, you can't get away from it. And I realize that this is horrible content right now, me staring blankly into the middle distance, trying to think about philosophers in the ancient world. Plato, Diogenes, and Ptolemy. There we go. You like Plato too? Hey, Bubble World Comics. So Plato, Diogenes, Ptolemy. How about that? How about that? There we go. That was too much. Were there specific questions about Red Cloud? Or did you just kind of want me to ramble about Red Cloud? Or say something about Red Cloud? Just in general. Yeah, I mean, he was Lakota, and he fought against the United States in a big war that lasted for, like 40-something years. One of the few Native Americans that was able to fight down the United States. Red Cloud's War was a period of time where they pretty much took over big chunks, they being Red Cloud and his Native American armies, took over big chunks of Wyoming and Montana. They took over some forts and killed a whole bunch of soldiers. One of the things that still comes up today is the treaty that was signed at the end of Red Cloud's War between Red Cloud and the United States, is Treaty of Fort Laramie, because the government of the United States recognized certain pieces of land to be given over to the Dakota and the Lakota tribes, and then they sort of completely forgot about that. And I think there are probably still lawsuits going on even today between some of those Native American tribes and the United States based around the Treaty of Fort Laramie. I can't remember how many of them or if there are still, but I seem to remember that there are still quite a few active lawsuits where the Native American tribes are trying to force the United States to recognize the official positions that they took in Fort Laramie and expand territory that is now mostly like in the Black Hills region. It was my rank 3 Eastern. Confucius, Zoroaster, and the Buddha. So there you go. There's some Red Cloud stuff and some Red Cloud's War stuff and some Fort Laramie stuff. I will fight no more forever. Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, the first Native American that comes to your mind. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that happened out in the West that a lot of people don't know about, and we don't talk about it very much when we teach U.S. history. Well, let me rephrase that. Many people do not talk about that a lot when they cover U.S. history. I talk about all of that junk because the United States points fingers all the time at other countries and it's like, you're committing genocide. Like, yo, dude. Pot, this is kettle. And I'm not trying to say that America is not a cool place. I don't necessarily think that I could probably live somewhere else, but I don't want to live anywhere else right now. I like this country. I like the laws and the freedoms that I have here. I think it's a pretty great place to go, but to make yourself better, you have to admit where you screwed stuff up too, right? So I'm not all about the whole American exceptionalism. Like, we're perfect and we never did anything wrong. Like, we're made out of humans and humans do stuff wrong. So yeah, it's just the value of large numbers prevents that argument from being valid. Yep. Okie doke. I've actually gone a significantly larger amount of time than I thought that I was going to, but that's okay because we're having a good time. So anybody else have any questions or anything that you want to talk about? Otherwise, I see where we're going to go raid. Anybody? Questions, comments? Punic at the disco. You started talking about Rome. What's next week? Next week is a survey. A survey of emerging cultures around 200 BC. So at the end of the last phase, we did a survey of emerging cultures that started at the beginning of the beginning of the Iron Age, and sort of brought these new players into the mix. So we're going to talk about people like the Numidians, the Xiongnu over in Asia. We're going to talk about the Axumites and lots of smaller little groups that are going to play larger roles as we move forward in the next phase. Did I type the Discord thing and the thing didn't show up? Oh, friggity doo. Oh well, that stinks. Thanks, Streamlabs. I bet it has something to do with the whole OBS thing crashing. That's Discrod. No, it's not working when I'm typing it directly in Twitch either. So who knows? Streamlabs might have just capoodled. Anyway, spelling helps. Discrod. Everybody go check out the Discrod. Thank you, Kelly, for posting the actual link. If you click that link right there, you can go hang out on the Discord. I do my best to post topics that are coming up in the future to let everybody know what's going to happen. I need to sit down sometime next week and figure out what phase 5 is going to look like. And when that happens, I'll post the next few out. I don't like to completely plan everything out because sometimes I get into the middle of talking about stuff and go, yeah, I really need to do something on those people. And I need to be able to kind of fit them in right here. So, yeah. There we go. All right, ladies and gents. I think that's going to do it for me for the night. So I am going to switch on over here and we're going to go do a raid. And we're going to go raid an artist. And you're very much welcome. MC Foreign, Motivic, as always, very welcome. I enjoy this stuff. It's what I do for marine bio artist. I'm not sure exactly what that's supposed to be, my friend. I do this for a living. I teach college for a living, but I like doing this stuff. Just to be honest, this has been more fulfilling at times. Oh, marine bio artist. That's who you want me to go raid. We're going to go raid Daniel Anderman. Who is a really cool artist. I initially rated him purely because he was wearing a cool hat at the time. But he's actually a really great guy. He knows an amazing amount of art history and art technique. So if you're interested in art, and I know that a lot of people are, feel free to pepper him with questions. So I don't know exactly what he's going to do, but we're going to go raid him. So our battle cry as we show up is adventure. And if you have the adventure hat emote, throw that in the old the chat when we get there. Thank you all so very, very much for coming by. I appreciate all of the interaction, all of the talking, all of the questions and the comments. This stuff really makes me kind of fired up, and I like this stuff a lot. So I hope you all have a great weekend. My next stream is next Thursday, 1900 CST. And I will see everybody right around the corner. You all have a good one. See you later.